Right. Evie and I are back. Evie is wiping whipped cream off her face because she just got a puppuccino from Starbucks. And I guess I can use this to plug my newsletter, as there will be an exclusive picture of Evie and her puppuccino in that newsletter. So subscribe to God Rolls. um, Besides that being the big event of my 4th of July, since I'm not really doing anything else, I wanted to make a Destiny video talking about, I was originally going to make a video, and I still might do this in the future, about what I think is getting content vaulted next. And yet, the more I think about this, the more I sort of just keep coming back to the idea that I don't want anything else content vaulted. I'm tired of this process. We got the big, huge cuts in Beyond Light where we lost 4 planets to the darkness and they're enshrouded in, a void field or whatever. And then we lost Leviathan. This was losing 5 raids, I think, including 2 raid layers. I lost track of how many strikes. 7, I think. They vaulted a bunch of Crucible maps, 2 Gambit maps, and then all the patrol stuff from that, the whole Red War campaign, including missions from existing things. And even though the future of content vaulting is not necessarily cuts that big, they have kind of said in the past that they want to keep the game this size. And so when they will cycle new content in, they want to cycle new content out, usually in the kind of expansion phase. My 2 picks for what will probably be vaulted is either the EDZ. If we do get Old Chicago, that's kind of another foresty earth area, which might be a little redundant with the EDZ, so they might take that out. Or the entire Forsaken expansion, which is now 3 years old. They have never made it free, which is not really evidence toward it being removed yet, and yet they have said they don't like the fact that it makes the story confusing with evil Uldren, and now we have a good Crow Uldren here. And I could see them taking that out. But we would be losing, I don't know, a lot of stuff with this. And even if it isn't kind of the same level, I mean, even cutting just the EDZ, one of the 2 remaining kind of original zones from the game, that's 2 strikes in, an era where Destiny does not need to keep losing strikes, certainly. With the ones we are losing getting replaced by old Destiny 1 ones coming back pretty much. And then, the entire expansion zone, I guess we've lost a lot of what makes the EDZ because there are no Red War missions there anymore. So those are all kind of cut. And I just don't really agree with this philosophy in general. Removing paid content just seems weird from a business perspective, in that we were not really told that this content would be going away up front, and it remains weird that we bought Destiny 1 and pretty much the entire experience of vanilla Destiny 1 has been completely Destiny 2. The entire vanilla experience of Destiny 2 has been stripped out of the game with the elimination of these zones and the Red War campaign and 2 paid DLCs. That is weird to me, and I don't love it. The second thing is I just don't really agree with the philosophy that the game can get too big, especially now if we're only having to if they made these big cuts, fine, I guess that stuff's not coming back, and yet does anyone really feel like the game benefited from this? They said that they wanted to kind of condense player populations in a way so there weren't so many activities, so people aren't running Reckoning and Menagerie and things like that. And yet, I don't think that we gained more than we lost with this situation. I know that there was probably some behind-the-scenes stuff I can't register where, Bungie needed to do this for the back end for this or that reason, but I don't think this idea of keeping the game below a certain file size is necessary. I mean, this is an era where Call of Duty is 250 gigabytes. Destiny is now jammed down to around 80. So I just don't care if Destiny is 120 gigabytes at this point. People who are dedicated players are not really going to have a problem devoting a solid chunk of their hard drive to Destiny. So I don't think that's a real concern among most players. And that seems kind of a made up excuse to do this. And I think we are at a point where Destiny certainly doesn't need to lose more stuff. The strike playlist is already too repetitive, and there are already kind of not enough strikes given the ones that we lost, and We have not fully replaced those at all. We absolutely do not need to lose more Crucible maps. I think that is blindingly obvious. Or if you eliminate any more Gambit maps, Gambit won't exist at all. And to me, I put this in the same category of like, this was this big thing that Bungie wanted to do, but ultimately it wasn't very good in practice. And we've already seen them reverse course with sunsetting. Weapon sunsetting kind of negated all the effort people were putting into grinding out rolls and things like that. And after a lot of pushback to that, they decided to eliminate that concept entirely, and they listened to everyone and kind of restored things. They also quasi-listened to what I'm talking about with content vaulting in terms of seasonal content, where they agreed to at least leave seasonal content up for an entire year, so you're not just like playing content for 3 months and then it goes away forever. That never really made sense from like a development side in terms of like, why would you invest that much effort for content people get to play for, in some instances, like a month and a half, 2 months if it comes in mid-season, so that those activities are available all year long. That has come with some additional problems where like they don't really give you a reason to run, like battlegrounds or something, or hunts or things like that, because they don't put those into like current objectives because all the seasons are sold separately. That said, I think this is still a fundamental better philosophy. And if we are talking about removing stuff from the game, at the very least, all of the seasonal content will be removed when Witch Queen hits. And that is like not an insignificant amount of content. So like there will no longer be battlegrounds and hunts and overrides and expunge missions, and assuming Presage is going away, and Harbinger, and all these things like that, where that is still content that is being cut. And then on top of that, they probably are going to remove another zone or two, which I just don't think is necessary at this point. And like, I would rather the world just keep expanding, and I want to see actually some of the stuff they cut cycle back in. And I've talked before about this weird gap that they're doing where they're using the content vault to pretty much only bring stuff back from Destiny 1 while continually removing kind of the earliest content from Destiny 2. So Destiny 2 is this increasingly weird setup of being mostly very new Destiny 2 content and then very old reprised Destiny 1 content. And the gap in the middle just keeps getting wider and wider as they remove more stuff. And I don't like the idea that this is going to kind of continue on indefinitely, and we are just going to, keep losing things to the point where the game is almost entirely made up of, paid expansion content with all the stuff in the interim deleted because it was seasonal. And then slowly the expansions themselves are going to be deleted. Like, this isn't how the world should work. Like, it should keep expanding and keep getting bigger, and more aspects of it should be made free over time. I have no idea why Forsaken is not free at this point. Like, it has been 3 years. They've removed a ton of stuff for free-to-play Destiny players, including the entire base game, which was like available for a short time, but sunsetting killed pretty much everything that free players had access to, and they're only starting to introduce stuff back into that. Like Vault of Glass is like the only free raid that people can run now, but I think they need to make more stuff free. But are we going to get to the point where Forsaken is free for a year and then it's cut? And like, I just don't like these decisions continually being made in terms of like what goes. And I put content vaulting in the same category as sunsetting. I almost think it's a worse problem, honestly. I get that sunsetting was the more kind of imminent option because of people really didn't want specific weapons to go away. And like, now that it's gone, it does feel a little better to loot and stuff. And I think that was the right decision. And yet, like, I still think it's a bad call that all of these other things went away. And I miss the ability to potentially farm old raids for like, if those weapons could not be sunset, like to go back and like get new copies of those weapons. I like the idea people had of like featured raids where each week you rotate a raid that has like featured gear for pinnacles and things, and like now they've cut they've cut so many raids out that would be kind of hard to execute, and farming those for transmog or going back to do any of the old content we used to have. Like I said, the one thing in an article, the one thing they should take out of the content vault is Menagerie, because you could easily slot new weapons into that and have people keep farming it. We missed the tribute hall. Like there's just so many things that got cut that whatever we gained from this, and like I still don't really even know what that is. It doesn't seem worth it. And then continuing to do this, like forcing Destiny to be like fit within this certain box does not seem like it's worth the idea of like the game takes up too much hard drive space, and these extra 2 to 4 strikes are really bringing down the game somehow. Like, I just don't really understand that philosophy. And this is something they've shown themselves to be flexible in terms of sunsetting, in terms of getting rid of seasonal content. So this is kind of like the last major thing. And I think it's out of everyone's mind because the Witch Queen is not arriving in like 2 months like it normally would. And by now we probably would have heard about that. We probably would have heard about what's being sunset. Instead, it's probably not coming till like, I don't know, February at the earliest is my guess. So this is not really on everyone's mind. But if that rolls around and they're like, surprise, we're cutting EDZ or Nessus or the Dreaming City and Tangled Shore, I think you're going to have a lot of unhappy people again, and I would not blame them. I just don't like this idea of sacrificing content. And like, this was the problem with sunsetting. You get 30 new weapons, but 30 old weapons are sunset. Now with expansions, you get a cool new zone, but you're losing an old zone. And I don't think this is a trade-off that needs to be made. And if it is made, I think it should be a lot more targeted in terms of the kind of things that are removed, which we did not really see with Beyond Light, which was just taking a giant axe to the game to the point where I think it was like 70%, like it lost like 70% of, it was over half at least, but like in terms of the overall kind of volume of what it lost, it was an enormous chunk of the game. I just don't want to keep going through this process every year, and with 3 more years to come at least of Destiny, I think that people are going to not really enjoy this this repeating year after year after year, and kind of being nervous about what's going to get cut this time. We'll see how this pans out. They have not really talked about this for a while, and leaving us to kind of just guess at what's going to go. I guess EDZ might do the least amount of harm. I would say the one zone that is probably the least relevant and could be cut is the moon, maybe, I'd say. Like, given the sheer non-amount of stuff we have to do there, I would not like to kill that dungeon because I think we don't need to lose any dungeons, but that makes sense. Ironically, the thing they've introduced the most recently, Cosmodrome, might be actually the most useless of anything, given how little they've utilized it other than bringing back a couple old strikes. So like, I don't, the stuff we're gaining is not necessarily always great. Like Europa, I really like, sure, that was a solid addition, but Cosmodrome, not so much. And I would rather have Mars back or Io or things like that. So we'll see what their philosophy ends up being for this going forward. If they are going to stick with this, or if it will take a lot of mass protesting and things again to kind of sunset content vaulting. And that's kind of my hope for this. I realize that I might be more impassioned about this than some people, and this is not really as easy of an argument to make as opposed to sunsetting, which was kind of a much more clear problem, and yet I still think it's an issue, and it's definitely going to keep coming up every single year as long as it happens. So we'll see what happens, but thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Take care.